Hi, my name is Gary Schiff. My Hebrew name is Yecheskel Schiff. And I want to start today by acknowledging all the great work of Yiboneh and Rav Aaron here, and all that you guys do to spread the light of Torah around the world. It's just a fantastic organization, and I'd encourage you to support them. Today I want to talk about the Jewish home, about the centrality of the Jewish home and the impact of alternative lifestyles, and what is that doing to the Jewish home. And we need to address this topic with extreme empathy, with sensitivity, but always with truth. And that's the challenge. But I want to just share with you today what the general view is across the general world, and also in the observant Jewish world. Unfortunately, these attitudes and these misconceptions have developed. So in general, what people think is, in the general world is, hey, people are born this way. There's nothing we can do about it. Counseling doesn't work. Counseling can even be dangerous. And so what most counselors and even most rabbis, many rabbis, will say is, they're born this way, counseling doesn't work. The best we can do is give them a big hug. And that's what, and even to celebrate a little bit because of the challenges that they have. And that is not just in the Reform and conservative world, it's also in the observant Jewish world, and it's across the spectrum. I hear these attitudes in rabbis in the Haredi world as well as the Dati world, and of course counselors as well. And so we have a big challenge to overcome. What I'm going to try and shoot some holes in that theory today. Okay, I want to just personally reflect on who I am and why I'm involved with this issue. So about 24 years ago, I was the president of a small conservative shul in Reno, Nevada. Okay, and at the time, the conservative movement decided they wanted to ordain gay clergy. And some of us were a little taken aback by this. They sent around a video. There was a rabbi named Rabbi Elliot Dor, and as I recall in the video, what he did is he compared the Torah to the bones of a fish. Okay, he said the molecules are still there, but the fish, it's lying on the ground and it's taking a different form. And a lot of us said, well, I don't know that that's the rock I want to hold on to, the rotting bones of a fish, to be honest. And, my concern, I think many others were, well, if you start taking the Torah apart with this, then what else is going to fall apart? And there was about 12 presidents of different conservative shuls, and we were trying to move our congregations outside the conservative movement at the time. It didn't work, but that's how I got my start in the involvement in this issue, in this challenge, I would say. I would also say that in terms of mentors and friends and families, my closest mentor my entire life at work has been a guy that lives this lifestyle. And I have very close people in my family that are involved. And these are wonderful people. These are people that I love with a full heart. So, I say that as so to understand that this is not coming from any place of animosity. When I came to Israel, I started a small organization called Jewish Family Forever. Jewish Family Forever is 152 people that are just involved in the issue. We try and advocate with the government, with agencies, etc., for the traditional Jewish family. You're welcome to look us up on Facebook and join that. And the last reason I say I'm involved with this, I would just say, is there are many rabbis and psychologists that are frankly just intimidated by the LGBT community. And it's difficult, you have your rabbi in an organization, and one of the parents has other children that are involved in this, and so a lot of people say, who needs it? Who needs to get involved? And I'm just going to tell you why this is such a pressing issue, because if we look at the data, I find it to be shocking. Okay, so just to give you an idea, this is from 2 years ago, and now the numbers are even bigger. But 2 years ago, Gen Zers are young people between the ages of 18 and 27 or 28. Okay, how many do you think are self-identifying, saying, I'm part of the LGBTQ community. 21%. That was 2 years ago. That was twice what it was 4 years before that. So 21%. They did a survey back just in March of this year, in 2024, and the numbers now are, they did a survey of women between 18 and 28, and 30% of women in the United States are saying they're part of the LGBTQ community. In the most elite universities, at Harvard, it's 30%. That was 2 years ago. And at Brown University, it was 38%. At Columbia University, now this Columbia University study was done by the LGBTQ community, so maybe there's a bias there, but their numbers were over 50%. So to say this problem, or this challenge, if it's a problem or a challenge, whatever it is growing. And it's growing rapidly, and it can't help but not impact the religious Jewish world. So I want to just share one other little data point here. Last year, in 2023, we also have the T in LGBTQ, trans, or the gender dysphoria. So last year, 1.6 million people in the United States said that this is a problem for them, and they spent $4.1 billion with a B on surgery and drugs. So this is this whole area of sexuality in the United States is bleeding into the religious world, and bleeding is probably not the nicest way to say it, but it's impacting us in a big way. The second thing I was going to talk about is the counseling situation. And there's a lot of folks that say counseling doesn't work. So I want to just mention to you a couple of studies that have been done. So one study is 200, these are self-selected individuals who say that they have had a change from homosexual heterosexual orientation that lasted at least 5 years. This is every one of these 200 self-selected individuals. Of course, that's self-selected, so who knows. And then there was a study done by Diamond and Roski in 2016, again going back 8 years, that said that people who that sexuality changes over time, and that say 40% of men and 50% of women experience a change in sexual attractions over time, and moreover, of those reporting such change, 75% of men and about the same 75% of women reported the change was to heterosexuality, right? So even without counseling, sexuality is not something today, this is where I am, it's a spectrum, it moves, and people don't understand that. And the last thing I want to just say in terms of counseling and does counseling work, besides the data that shows that it does, is that there's counselors that we're aware of here in Israel and Jerusalem, and of course these folks are concerned because they don't want their names out there as much as you know, for fear that they're going to be ostracized. But they are so busy, they have a hard time taking on new clients. So all of that said, counseling works. And I want to just share with you, there was an article in VI News in 2020. This is by a woman, just to give you just a flavor of what's going on. And she today has five children, and she's in a beautiful, happy marriage. But she tells a story of how she got out of the army and she got involved in this lifestyle in Tel Aviv. And the title of her story is, Rabbi, thank God I didn't listen to you, that I didn't still flow with my feelings and leanings, which I, quote, was created with. And she talks about, you know, her struggle and how the first thing she had to do and the hardest thing was to give up the girlfriend. But once she and her girlfriend split up, she was able to find some counseling and find her way through this. And I'm not saying anything, Rabbi probably does wonderful work, but in this area, he's just wrong, okay? He's just flat out wrong. People are not born this way, and counseling works, okay? So, just to give you an idea that we know that people aren't born this way, there was a DNA analysis done in 2019 We're talking about 500,000 individuals. This is MIT, Harvard, and Cambridge. So the question is, did they find a gay gene? Did they find an LGBTQ gene? Answer, no. Any markers? Zero, okay? If you're left-handed, right, they can find a marker. If you're a Kohen, right, going back to the time of Aaron, we can find a marker. But we can't find a marker for this. Now, will they find something in the future? I don't know. But to date, we don't have a marker. So again, there is nothing, as a counselor friend of mine says, essentialism just doesn't exist. This idea that you're essentially born this way just doesn't exist. So again, reviewing, not born this way, not essentially this way, counseling works. So what are the factors? If it's not nature, then the question is what causes people to jump into this different lifestyle? Because this is very painful. It's very difficult for people. So there's lots of examples, and I am not a counselor. This is where, if you have a challenge or you know somebody with a challenge, this is where we send them to a counselor to find out what's going on. But for example, some of it's anxiety driven. You take a young woman and she's on the roller coaster of dating, and she's got close female friends, and it doesn't work out again and again, and she's already got anxiety, and you can get crushed by that. And then the boundaries come down between your close friends. Abuse is certainly an issue. There's a counselor I work with that talks about arousal triggers. There are certain triggers that trigger people in a way that they get sexually aroused, and that's something that can be dealt with. There's parenting challenges. There's the whole idea that the attraction is a spectrum, and you need just to find somebody that fits you. But on top of that, you've got welcoming and encouraging gay communities that actually celebrate people that in the past might have tried to hide or be ashamed, and now they're proud. And you can see that by the numbers. You can see that by the data that this is a real challenge. So anyway, let's just give a little summary here. So we know that trends towards homosexuality are advancing rapidly in a younger generation. We know that the data shows that sexuality can move over time. And we know that client-driven counseling can be effective. And we know there's no scientific evidence, DNA or otherwise, yet discovered that indicates the whole idea of essentialism, that you're essentially. It refutes the notion of essentialism. Okay, now I want to move into the religious side of things. Now, from a Jewish standpoint, from a Torah standpoint, what is the problem? So here's some concepts that are in Judaism and Torah that we need to understand. So the first is the concept of free will. So essentialism implies that people's free will is limited. It's fundamentally limited. They can't learn to control. They can't learn to control those urges. And even if they wanted a great spouse, even intellectually they wanted a spouse, there's nothing they can do about it because this is who they are. That is counter to the way the Torah speaks. The Torah talks us about that we have choice. We have free will. Now, I am not minimizing the challenge that many people have. And even though it's not something they're born with, but the nurture influences can be very strong. And this could be, our empathy has to go out to the struggle that these people have. But we should just know that this is counter to free will. The other thing is essentialism, the whole idea of essentialism, as a counselor friend of mine says, means that you define yourself wholly by your involuntary arousal reactions. Is that who you are? You want to be defined by your involuntary arousal reaction and not your voluntary choices and your ideals of what you would want in your life, right? Wouldn't you want to be defined by your voluntary choices and your ideals and where you want to go with your life? So, we just need to think about these ideas. And the other thing I would just say is that in essentialism, as a counselor friend of mine describes it, it sees sexual pleasure as like a human right. And it diminishes the idea that it's a way of enhancing our relationship with our spouse and our God. It's not it's not about what gives me pleasure, not to get too personal here, but it's what pleasure am I giving to my partner? I mean, that's what we need to think about. What pleasure are we giving to a partner? Not what comes to me. And so, the whole idea of this essentialism turns all of that on its head. And so I think from a Torah standpoint, the idea of giving, that's who we are as Jews. We're givers. We're trying to help others. Not minimizing that, there has to be some level of personal self-satisfaction, and that's why there's counseling. Okay, now let's just talk a little further from a Jewish standpoint. So first I want a shout out to Rav Aaron Poston, who's got a wonderful, on the Yibonei website, if you haven't seen it, it's a lecture he gave on the sanctity of marriage, going all the way, starting with Noach and the problems of that generation and moving forward. And I really encourage you to listen to that as a companion to this here today. But if you were going to a new community, okay, there's a new community, there's a new village, and you want to, you're the first Jew moving there, you're establishing a new community, what's the first thing you do? Do you build a synagogue? No, you don't build a synagogue, right? The first thing you build is a mikveh. And why do you build a mikveh? Because family is paramount. Rabbi Hirsch says that pondering about whether it would be beneficial, he ponders about whether it's a good idea we should close the synagogue sometime just for a short period of time, so Jewish families should refocus on the centrality of the Jewish home, right? And as we know, the Zohar talks about the Shekhinah, God's presence. Where does God's presence dwell? It dwells when a man and a woman get together. That's where God's presence is. There's lots else written in the Torah and in our holy documents. There's the story of Adam and Eve, that they were at once one person and then they were separated. And our job is to find that other half of ourselves to put ourselves back together again. In the Zohar, it has a nice thought about this. It talks about when a person is in the union of intimacy, when male and female join, they become one. They are in one body and in one soul. They are one person, and God dwells in their oneness. This is right out of the Zohar. So, nice thoughts from our Jewish tradition about why a traditional family is so important. Okay, I want to just talk about one thing here for a moment, because there's a huge difference between men and women. There's a huge, not so huge, but there's certainly a difference. So for men, we read, a man shouldn't lie as a man, as one lies with a woman, and it's an abomination. And we read that in Vayikra or Leviticus. And by the way, we read it on the holiest day of the year, at the holiest time of year, when the Kohen Gadol is going into the Holy of Holies. Right after that, we read this law. So for men, it's crystal clear. It's a Noahide law. It's written very, very clearly. And a lot of men that get caught up in this, it's hard for them to stay on the derech, because they say to themselves, as I was saying, if the Torah is wrong about this, then what else is the Torah wrong about? And for women, it's a little different. There's almost a movement today that, you could be a frum woman and then you don't have to worry about this. So for women, it comes from a different place, but it comes from the sentence, the paragraph right before we talk about the men. It talks about you should not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or the land of Canaan to which I am taking you. So it's talking about the locals are doing these things, and you shouldn't do their practices. Kind of like today a little bit, to be honest. But the Rambam, the Maimonides, says that this law too, it's doraita, it's from the Torah, because of the wording. And the Shulchan Aruch, our guidebook for law, says, it's not okay for women as well as men. And there's women now in the religious world that say, I'm keeping all of the mitzvot, or I'm trying to, but this one's too hard for me. But that's not what just because it's not absolutely crystal clear like it is for men written in the Torah, it doesn't mean it's not a very big deal. And it's not a very big deal, not only because of the act of being with another woman or whatever the relationship is there. It's a big deal because you're missing out on on what your potential is. You know, we say in Shemayim, when two souls are born, that they're working hard. The angels are working hard trying to connect your future. You know, who's your bride going to be? So, you know, it's tough. It's you're short-circuiting their work in Shemayim, you know, or is one way of looking at this. Okay, Rav Herschel Schachter, he says, you know, just to be clear, we become susceptible to even the most egregious and vile forms of behavior if we do not guard against societal influence. Human nature is such that a person in his beliefs, character, dispositions, and actions is drawn after his friends and colleagues and acts in the same fashion as his countrymen. Okay, so that's the fear. And you know, just in closing, let me just mention a few things here. You know, if we know people that are struggling, what do? How do we deal with this? And I'd say the first thing is with just tremendous sensitivity and empathy. They're struggling. They are seriously struggling. And some of them are still struggling even though they've made this declaration. They're still struggling. And we should know, though, deep down that sexuality, specifically our involuntary arousal reactions, that's not who we are. That's not who we are in our essence. And if someone wants to seek help, they should know that there's client-driven counseling that works. And we should encourage them to seek it. You know, I'm blessed. I haven't been challenged with this either in any way in the societal influences. So I just want to say we all have different challenges, and this is a very difficult challenge, and God presents us with difficult challenges. These are difficult tests for some more than others, but ultimately our Torah is the guidebook of a life which God wants us to try our best to live, focused on the beauty and the centrality of the traditional Jewish family. Thank you very much.